Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Hal Bradley, and welcome to the Break It Down Show.
Yeah, always good to have Hal on, Dr. Hal. And your life is amazing. Every time I tell someone, oh, I know this guy. He was a drug smuggler. He did all these crazy things. He's been assassinated, and yet he's still alive. It blows people's minds, man. Do you ever just sit back and go, how did I live this crazy life and still exist? I mean, it's beyond the movies.
You know, Pete, I do. I do it all the time as I get older in life. And one, I'm very glad that throughout the decades I documented everything to corroborate this. As you well know, I'm being looked at right now by Netflix and Amazon for a potential
Sure.
TV series. Uh, uh, as I understand, I'll be even speaking to another producer today about a possible motion picture. So, yeah,
Yep.
but getting back to that statement, it's almost hard for me to even fathom it at this point. And when people do approach me with it and discuss it with me about them, they're absolutely floored that a man could have spent 15 years in the drug cartels, walked in not under arrest on his own free will, and made the choice 32 years ago to turn my life around and dedicate it to my country and to the people of my community. As you're aware, I've been captured and tortured and rescued and been through an assassination attempt here where I was left for dead in 5 years ago, and that was almost 30 years later. So these people don't let go of their vendettas, if you will. You know, a debt is a debt, and that's how they feel about it, and that's just the world of the cartels.
When you say assassination attempt and I say you were assassinated, let's just talk about specifically what that is, because again, this is shocking stuff. And I don't use the word you were assassinated lightly because they did the job.
Yes, they did. What happened was I had a kill order put on me approximately 32 years ago. And as I understand it, they had a cell up here in the Pacific Northwest that had located and identified me. And the kill order was activated at that point. And on the night of June 6, June 7 of 2020, around midnight, I was outside and back. And that's when they came and hit me. It was a one-man contractor. All he had was a name and an address on a piece of paper. And after multiple stabbings, serious professionally trained blows, he kept trying to bend my head forward. And from my military background and yours also, we both know that that's how you do a kill. It's never pinning the head back and doing a throat slash. It's always to immobilize the body. And so I was struggling with that and fighting. And as he kept stabbing me, he was hitting my cranium, my skull. And I finally went out. And it was amazing when I recovered from that. I don't even know how long I was under, but I was able to crawl to a neighbor's door, knock on the door. And of course, they implemented 911. And immediately I was put in the hospital. Didn't wake up for a day and a half. And when I did, my first thought was security. Based on how easy it is to hit anybody anywhere. So one of my former associates got to the hospital and got me out of there, and we put me up here. My home is secured. As you know, you've been here. And yeah, that was it. I got word later that the FBI did, in fact, take down that cell. So all is good. You know, we just move on to live another day and serve another day.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and like I said, it's not to be shocking, but these are shocking things that you've had to endure. And yet you have this tender side where you're often the last person that someone talks to before they pass. And so the reverend side, the PhD side, or the doctorate of divinity side, that person is a different person than the person you were when you were younger.
Well, Pete, 32 years ago when I made the decision to break away from the cartels, I flew to Culiacan, Sinaloa, Mexico, and sat down with the people I was working directly for. And everything was supposedly good to go. And I headed back up home. And when I got to the house, I had a white van sitting out front with two cartel soldiers and 350 kilos of cocaine in there, which was an average load for me to move in those days. And what I did is I turned them around because I was an underboss. I was able to give order, told them we were heated up federally and get the hell out of here with the load. And the following day, I walked into the U.S. Attorney's office and said, here I am. And as you know from prior relationship with me, I was the primary target of Operation Northern Exposure from 91 to 94. And for having Hal Bradley walk into the U.S. Attorney's office was absolutely mind blowing to them. They'd been tracking me for some time, knew that I was the largest ever in the history of the Pacific Northwest, and they knew that I was deeply cartel connected. So at that point, I'd made the decision. I wasn't arrested and started ratting on people. The Department of Justice doesn't invest interest in people that do that. They simply use up snitches and rats. I was quite the opposite. And as it came later, years later, when I was sentenced to federal prison, I was pulled out of Leavenworth early, brought up before a judge, and my sentence was dropped, and I became a contractor where I spent 17 years undercover. And over 80% of that, Pete, was done outside of the United States. I was fully operational throughout Mexico and various countries in Central America, working really high profile cases, working with DEA and Customs, but I did work with CIA, I did work with Homeland Security, Special Forces teams, and that gets also into some of the books, as you know, that I write, the action and adventure novels. That's based on 17 years of sitting in American embassies with teams that are coming in from behind the wire, just like we did, that were just outside of the wire, excuse me. And I would listen to their stories, and we would share our stories. And over the course of 17 years, I've got a lifetime of writing those action adventure novels, codenamed The Fox. And I really, really enjoy it because I believe that it gives honor to our fellow troops and citizens that risk their lives every single day in this war on drugs and human trafficking and weapons provision and cyber attacks and all of the things that the cartels are totally plugged into now. Where in the earlier years, when I was an international smuggler working for them out of Jalisco and Sinaloa, the main thing was primarily drugs at that time. That was 70s and 80s. But markets change as the border has changed. And,
yeah, I want to get into that in a second here. I want to back up, though, because when you say you're working for the government, let me push this thing on me. When you say you're working for the government, that means that you're getting paid by those guys. So are you a sworn in GS, kind of person, or what's your role? Hang on. I got to unmute you. Hang on now. All right, now you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm what they call a DOJ contractor, and what a contractor does is operate on a contractual basis that's renewed annually. You yourself have probably worked with a lot of contractors over the years in the Middle East, and so you know what I was. And guys like us at work, we work underneath that wire a lot. We're very covert. We're not exposed. We're put together with various teams of various constructions relating to the cases that we're involved with, the specifics. So it's very cloak and dagger type of work at my level. And this has nothing to do with cooperating people or anything. You get recruited by the government. They don't ask you. You can't go and ask for a job. They check your qualifications according to the interests of whatever case they may or may not assign you to. And you get a phone call and you're packing a bag and you're on your way to Panama the next night, that kind of stuff. And I did that 17 years.
Without asking you specifically, what kind of money is there in that work on the U.S. side? And then you're having to, if you're staying undercover, you have to work within the other system too, which is illegal. So you can't just say, "Oh, I lost a load of drugs every 10 weeks," whatever. So how do you, how is the pay? You don't gotta say exact, but is it decent? Is it worth your while? And then, how do you operate for 17 years and stay within the confines of our law, but also their law?
Very good question. Most commonly, I would jump off on a case and maybe work 2 or 3 days, make $25,000 for a couple of days, plus all expenses. Everything's covered. That's just what goes in my pocket. One time I did make 60 on a 3-day, and I almost quit at that time. I barely got out of there alive on that specific case that I can't talk about. But it pays good if you're actively involved. I was working multiple cases annually, but I would safely say the average range was $20,000 to $25,000 on a bounty hit, and I did okay.
And then how do you navigate that internally? I mean, obviously, the game on the cartel side, but it's got to be terrifying for you. This is where our lives overlap a lot, right? So if I'm
Yes.
out in a region and I expose myself, like a lot of times, like people ask me like about the combat that I've created, and I'm like, if I'm shooting at people, I no longer can operate in that area. And
I
so though I have the capability, I have to use my mouth, because the second I pull out a gun, I've lost my credibility, I've lost my trust, right? And so you've got to operate in this illegal world with a legal shadow over you with the U.S. government. How do you balance that, and how do you not go crazy trying to cover your tracks and outthink the people that are out trying to think you?
That's a good question. The first 15 years of my life where I was actively cartel involved, I was literally involved every single month for that 15 years. I started out as a smuggler, and I did that for 6 years. And then I spent the next 9 years developing safe houses, transportation routes, developing the market at a higher level, because we weren't moving 5 or 10 kilos of cocaine at a time. We were moving in the hundreds at a time.
Right.
And this became my expertise. And after so many years, you develop such a familiarity that when I did go undercover and became operational as a contractor, I had all of that savvy that another person such as myself from my former life, we can talk to each other, and within a very few minutes, we can assess, that this person is in fact qualified. Primarily, my cover was I was a Canadian narco trafficante up in Canada, and this was my cover. My name that was created by the U.S. Marshal Service was all under that umbrella of that identity, if you will. So when I went down, I was already credentialed when I would meet with somebody, because we had people who were still actively involved in the cartels that were covertly reporting to the Department of Justice, and they could sit there and say, yeah, this is, I'm not going to use my cover name, but they would say, this is so-and-so, and we've been doing business with him for a long time, so I'm bringing him here on and eyes on. And that's how it would be inserted into the various cartels that I took on. And yeah, you're damn right, it's scary, because they don't just take you out and kill you. They take you out and spend a few days to kill you. They're pretty effective at what they do. And a lot of the people that I worked with down there that would do the infiltration and insertion, we would actively get the cases going so fast that we were able to eradicate the problem that we were going after long before that informant could be discovered, because the moment he is, of course, I would have been blown away. So yeah, it's real touch and go, but you get a gut for it, a feel for it. You have a lifetime invested in it. And you also believe in your cause, Pete. What I did in my younger years of life, that's why I walked in of my own free will, because I just didn't want to be that person anymore. And I've always been grateful for the opportunity by the Department of Justice to work with the people I did, and have nothing but honor and respect for the people, as you well know, that are really out there in the trenches, putting it out there every single day. And the books that I write, I dedicate them to a lot of those agency people. And it's all good.
This is a bit of a heavy question, but I wonder, when you think about the human harm that you've caused through drugs and through trafficking, the violence that comes from that business in general, is it possible, or is it possible to balance the ledger on that with the rest of your life? Like, can you get to the point where your good and your bad have equaled out?
Yeah, absolutely. With me, a judge, I was at a sentencing once, and I turned to the judge and I said, well, saying I'm sorry just simply isn't enough. So what I did was I actively took on 17 years of making up for the 15 years of my life that I did bad. And I said, I think that an example of true retribution, if you will, to what you formerly have become, you just can't say words and it goes away. Now, the memories that I have in my life I've been retired since 2020, as you know, and I look back with fondness in the memories of being able to pay back for the stuff that I had accomplished in my younger years. I think of El Chappo and I in that picture I shared with you one time, when he was 26 years old and I was 28 years old, and we were smuggling marijuana for a guy named Rafael Cara Quintero. He's the one that executed DEA agent Kiki Camarena back in the 80s. And I look at how big El Chappo became, and when I met him, he was nothing but a mid-level soldier and smuggler like myself. And I really don't want to go too much into the violent aspects that I've been involved with. There's reasons for that, but you have to come up in the cartel world. You get tested. You have to prove your authenticity to your devotion to that particular cartel. And if you're unable to do that, then you're put in a 55-gallon drum full of gas or acid, or buried out in the desert with a bullet in your head. And that's just the way it is. But we all know that coming into that world. I grew up in a village down there as a child for about a year or so. I can't remember anymore. But I was 15 years old, 1969, and I was working in a mining camp down there. No mom, no dad, nobody else. And not a single person spoke English. I didn't speak Spanish. I was from Seattle, Washington. And just bang, one day I ended up in this mining camp. Family friend of our family's owned a percentage of it and said, let me send your kid down there and let him experience the world. Well, turned out, I was introduced to a kid my age down there whose family was the cartel of that region. So I was being groomed at a very early age. And my understanding of that world was obviously loyalty based to the friendship and to the family, and later the monetary growth. I mean, we made millions of dollars when we were young, and it's very, very hard to break away from that. But at some point, there's a decency factor in us, Pete, and that you realize that you're doing something wrong. And that's what caught up to me in my later years of life. And that's why I walked in. It was not to say I'm sorry. It was to show that I was sorry.
And, how did the legal system treat you?
With a lot of respect, because I wasn't some snitch that got, arrested and decides to tell on people. This is a very unique and extreme case, plus the level that I was at. Having somebody who's a known kingpin walk in the door probably has never happened. I've never heard of another one. And I wasn't anywhere close to being arrested. I had just made the decision that I wasn't going to raise my newborn children into this world. I wanted to take what I had made and build a beautiful life with it. And that's exactly what I was in the process of doing when I flew down to Sinaloa and was told that I was okay to move out. The idea was to develop their resources through what I had built up here, letting their people take over my post. But I should have known better. You make foolish decisions when you're younger, and the whole thing was me. I mean, how do you pass on something that you built? And it was a very complex and very involved organization that I created up here. Like I said, I had the safe houses, I had transportation routes put down. The client base that I was dealing with were organized crime families and organizations that were way above the streets, and they are operating to people that were above the streets. So we were in an extremely unique position to operate primarily undetected. Operation Northern Exposure was a multi-agency foundation founded by the Department of Justice when they finally put it together, just exactly who this blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy was in the Pacific Northwest corridor. Directly tied to Culiacan, directly tied to Guadalajara. It was an interesting time, a powerful time.
Yeah, I have the picture of you in El Chappo, so let me show that for a second.
Yeah. The guy in the middle, he was a contract killer out of Jalisco, working for the Carpintero family. Yeah, he was a lot thinner back then. He was 26 years old in that picture there. Long time ago, brother. I'll be 70 this year.
Yeah. All right, let me put you on mute for a second. So I'll talk. I don't want the echo to be there, but so you get a chance to get into this crazy life, and obviously there's money with it and everything else. But is there actually, like, apart from the way that you've done it, is there a way to just say I'm going to retire, or is that it? Are you trapped? Is there any way out that doesn't involve someone dying?
Well, brother, I'm living proof that there is not. I went down and negotiated my release from the organized crime lifestyle. I did believe at the time that they did accept it because I grew up as a child around the people that I talked to. But unfortunately, by the time I got home, the handshake had changed into a much more lethal situation. At that point, they're obligated to take me out because I just know too much. I'm too deeply involved. I'm the highest level person that they had in the entire Pacific Northwest corridor. And with that comes a lot of responsibility, a lot of power, a lot of decisions that I made that, again, I'm not going to go into at this point. But again, I would just like to reflect back to the latter years, the 17 years where I was able to serve my country and to serve my community, and say how very sorry I am for what I did. Now let me show you that I am. And as you know, while I was in federal prison, I started seminarial studies, completed the studies in there, and was ordained in a federal prison. And then upon my release, my early release, because I was going to work for the Department of Justice, I was formally ordained in a church in Seattle and completed my doctoral dissertation in '03 and received my doctorate in pastoral counseling. I have 18 years working with the homeless and the afflicted communities. I work in trap houses. I work in homeless camps. A lot of years picking up food from Salvation Army and distributing it to the less fortunate. And so many people, like in the trap houses, the moment they get their EBT card for their food benefit, they trade it off for heroin or meth or fentanyl. So they starve. And it's not my place to judge their action. It was my place to serve their action. And I really take that to heart, Pete, that we need to be there for one another, and we need to be the example and show that there is an avenue out of that world. And, it's really funny. When I retired in around 2020, I never thought I would look back again. But if I was called tomorrow, even at this old frail age I'm at, I would not hesitate to jump on a plane and go where I'm needed. That's in me now. And it doesn't leave us. It just doesn't leave.
Do you miss the action days, like when you were out running cases and infiltrating? Is there a time in your smuggling days that you look back upon fondly, or is that too dark and full of shame?
Oh yeah, I have a lot of good memories. I have a lot of bad memories, but I look back and I'm going to be that guy, hopefully sitting in his rocking chair in his 80s and 90s with a grin on his face and a gleam in his eye, because it was pretty amazing and remarkable times. But I also do a parallel to that, Pete. I look at the 17 years where I worked with all the agency people and worked with special forces teams and SEALs and all the people I met in the embassies that are directly involved in the outside of the wire work that we did. And those are probably my stronger and more fonder memories. There's real brotherhood that develops in that. And especially having a contractor, when I come in and they go, "Oh my God, it's Hal Bradley." I've had agents that were older agents that were SAC level saying, "God, yeah, we were watching you 20 something years ago, or 30 years ago. And here you are sitting in front of me and we're going out on a mission, and so it was pretty cool. I was respected. I was treated honorably. They knew that there was no nonsense to the work that I was willing to commit myself to. And every bit of information or evidence I brought back could be verified. It was factual. It's extremely important to stay on that. I wasn't there to impress anybody. I was there to do the job that I was sent down there to do, and to watch the backs of those that watched my back. But you have to understand, Pete, in my situation being so deeply planted undercover, a lot of the cases, a lot of assignments I'd be running without any cover whatsoever for days, sometimes even weeks at a time undercover. And then I would have to surface somehow to get word to my team that I'm still breathing. And this is what I have for a debrief. And so usually I would go to embassies and enter through the embassies and reconnect with people when I would be gone for so long. That was
I want to ask a question there. When you do that resurfacing, and again, this is where our worlds overlap, right? If I've got a source who pops up in Bolivia at an embassy, I now have to say, okay, look, I trust Hal, except for I don't trust Hal, and I've got to figure out, is Hal on our team? The big question that I always tell everybody in the spy world, like when you're trying to understand, is who is running who? Like who's in charge of this thing? And if you don't approach it that way, you are the one being run. So talk a little bit about that on the American side. And by the way, when you go back to the cartel side, same rules apply. Who's running who? Is Hal with us, or is Hal with somebody else?
It's a double identity life, as you know, having worked in the industry yourself. When you're under, you're part of that world, period, end of story. And when you surface or break away from it, you have to have a viable purpose to separate in that moment and to be able to re-enter the case assignment, or whatever you're working on at that time. And I was always able to do that. For one, I was a Canadian kingpin. That was my identity. So I was a man of authority, and it's awful hard for a soldier level cartel member to question the authority of a person who is recognized at a boss level status. And of course, bosses aren't just down there doing one deal. I have other things going on in my life that would require my breakaway. And that's how I was able to effectively do it. I used American embassies because I could insert, and if I'm spotted, it could be, oh, well, I lost my passport, or it could be a family emergency. It could be a number of stories or excuses that I could come up if, in fact, I was spotted. But in all the years that I never was. And as soon as I would get past the Marine Corps security guards, I would let somebody know within the embassy compound that who I was. I would say, yeah, I'm a DOJ contractor. I need to speak to DEA, or I need to speak to Customs, or whoever it was at the time. And just let them know that I'm out of the field momentarily. I'm here. Let's get me debriefed. Here's what I've got. And then a day or two later, return back into the game until the mission is complete. And I have to.
Did you ever have trouble with them accepting that when you came in? Because someone's going to be like, yeah, whatever. They're not going to believe you. Because you're a walk-in. I mean, and walk-ins aren't treated with most respect.
Well, you've been in and out of embassies yourself. You know who to talk to when you walk in. And primarily what I do is I would let a Marine Corps security guard know, listen, I'm an undercover operative. I need to speak to someone DEA. I would literally whisper it in their ear, and they would, yes, sir. Right away, they would get me out of the mainstream of the entry area to the embassy, and I'd be taken to a corridor or up a set of stairs or wherever may be that I need to be directed. So I was pretty much out of line of sight instantaneously each time that I would operate in that capacity and enter into a U.S. embassy. They were,
and so then your reentry to the other side is really, you never break your character. You're just gone for a couple of days, which is normal for your pattern of life.
Oh yeah, there's been times when I've used created airplane tickets, things to this nature, where it looks like I had to fly back to take care of business in my organization, things to that nature. But again, you have to understand the status of a boss level player. It would be very disrespectful to question me, especially since I've already been in. And when we're taking loads, we're not taking down loads. We're using U.S. Treasury dollars to purchase loads. And the loads that do get stateside, we'll do a second or third generation takedown. And what that is, Pete, is I may be the primary source that puts a deal together. Then another source picks up this deal that takes it to another place for distribution. Well, somewhere in that trail, a couple steps removed away from me, another generation, if you will. That's how those kind of takedowns, back in my day anyway, were handled. So we call them second and third generation takedowns. It'd be so far away from me that I would be without suspicion on me. I would not be suspected. How would I have the knowledge that it was at a safe house I've never been to before? How would I have the knowledge what vehicle it's transporting in when the entire time we had all of the knowledge? Pretty it's cat and mouse. And you, again, Pete, you've been in the field, you've been undercover, you know how that works. And the beautiful thing is you're working with professional people around you that know how to survive you and get you the hell out of that when it goes bad. And I've been in a few, well, as you know, I was actually captured and I was rescued out of a black site down in a particular country I'm not going to go into at this time.
Yeah.
And there's people.
I was going to say, getting into the thing about being undercover and coming in and then going back over, all of that it's very complex. And when you are taking on a government as an illegal entity, the government can just be so big. I always talk about, like, if I was adversarial towards the U.S. and I had my same job, counterintelligence agent, I would target Congress, and China or whoever would just give me all the money I needed to hire all the people I needed to go and insert into that world. And because the government can just be massive compared to what really is a small business. I don't want to say like smuggling and carteling is a small business, but compared to what the government can throw at you, multiple agencies, budgets for multiple cars on multiple. I mean, it's a lot of money, but they're relentless with that. And so when you think about the expertise they have to have within the cartel to battle that, to do their own counterintelligence, their own counter operation things, Are they hiring pros? Is that operation big enough? What are your like? How does
Well,
that work?
in my experience being around the cartels, I know for certain that they have people placed in government, people placed in law enforcement. If they have a specific interest of intelligence gathering resource, they'll recruit people out of foreign countries. Like I knew a guy who was former Spetsnaz, and he was literally connected at such a level through the Politburo in Russia that he had access to satellite comm systems when the satellites would be passing over and letting people to know when to ditch and run and things to this nature. Yeah, of course, they have more money, some of those cartels, than some small nations have. They're extremely powerful, well trained within their decades of growing into the cartels that they are today. So yeah, make no mistake, there's nothing at this point of the game that can last too long. Such as a contractor, such as myself, I don't think that I could have a career last the way it did in the 90s and the early 2000s. I walked in 93, and it was a whole different ball game from 2023. And you interview people that are explaining this to your audience all the time about the expansion and the growth of intel gathering. The resources they have now, I mean, are just amazing, just amazing.
Yeah, there are
Just
cameras everywhere.
Well, yeah, and there's satellites too, brother. There's a lot. There's a lot of not running away anymore, and
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm glad my days are over with that.
Yeah, me too, man. Me too. So, what are the questions? I get these questions every now and then because of the show, and my friends want to know these things. But one of the beliefs is that if the U.S. government wanted to, they could go out and smash the cartels in Mexico today. They could just choose to do it and work to just eliminate them. I don't know that that's true. That there's enough political will and operational capital to do it. But what are your thoughts?
Well, for one, Mexico is a sovereign nation, and sovereignty is everything in the globe and the way things are ran in these independent countries today. So for us to actively involve, we would literally have to do like what Ronald Reagan did in the Reagan era, where he made a declaration against a declaration of war against the cartels in this country. Now that wasn't approved by Congress. That was simply an executive order action at the time that his wife was teaching the kids in our country to just say no to drugs, and the Iran-Contra affairs were going on, and Oliver North was big in the news, and on and on at that time. Pablo was still alive in those years. I was actually in Acapulco undercover the day they shot and killed Pablo Escobar in Bogota. We had a guy came in that night from the Tijuana cartel, and he was weeping in tears, saying our Jefe was just assassinated on a rooftop. And I'll never forget it. I was sitting there and I was working with a joint CIA DEA team at the time on another target of another case when this guy came in. And that's the first I heard Pablo Escobar had been assassinated. I hadn't seen the news. I was running, I was undercover. And pretty crazy. So you never know. It just
you never know.
You never know, brother.
Yeah. When you think about just all of these things that happen, I mean, that's crazy to find out internally that Escobar has been assassinated.
Yeah.
You're among the first people to know. You're in the organization when you find out, really. I mean, maybe not his, but you're in that world. So that's crazy. But when you think about the other times and we don't got to do the violent thing, but just in general, you're like, I can't believe I'm doing this right now. Like, sure, the feds are talking to you going, I can't believe I'm talking to Hal Bradley, but you must have your own experiences where you can't believe what you're doing at the time.
I talk about it all the time, and especially to my audience that buys my action adventure novels. They'll ask questions about that and say, God, is this even for real at all? And I say, well, that's why I was so glad that I documented my life, because I knew at a fairly early age when I started the smuggling years and stuff that there should be record of it. There should be something kept of it. And then over the decades, as things started to manifest, it's like my father was an MP at the Nuremberg trials. And I always regretted that my dad didn't document watching all the Nazis being tried. And the same rule applied. And I think that's what put that in my mind at a young age in life, was to make sure that I could verify everything I say. And it's very important, because this is such an amazing story that I even pinch myself sometimes. And my friends and family that are close to me just go, oh my God, but we know it's true. And that's the thing that gets to you, because sometimes as you get older and things move with years, you look back and go, God, did I really do that? Was I really that deeply involved? And to me, it was normal at the time. That was the life I chose. That was the life that I lived and existed in. I mean, doesn't everybody have a couple 100 kilos at a time coming to them? And,
Sure, of course.
well, I did. And that's how I looked at it. So yeah, stepping back away, transforming into the ministry that I came into and all of that, I truly felt the calling to serve. It's not some limp excuse to walk around a prison yard with the Bible in his hand. Quite the opposite. When I was formally ordained, some of the high Italian mafiosi guys that were there at the particular place I was at that time actually threw a big meal in my presence and really knew that I truly believed and truly felt and truly wanted to be called into that. And as you also know from our visiting in the past, I was a hospice prisoner that was trained in hospice to aid and assist fellow prisoners through the dying process. And I took 24 prisoners through that process. And I was in newspapers, talked to by reporters, all kinds of stuff. And the glory, all of that glory goes to the system for allowing that type of a program to be formed, and for God opening that door for an inmate to be there in comfort to another inmate as he's going through the dying process. So it was quite an interesting time.
I'll say. Let me jump in here and say this. Down here below is the link for Fox, the Fox series, book number 1. You guys, this stuff is awesome. Hal writes them prolifically. They cranks them out all the time. So you got some catching up to do, but they're easy reads. They're super entertaining. You know what I always say? Buddy read. Buy one for you, buy one for a friend, and say, hey, let's read some of this stuff from the Fox and our buddy Hal Bradley. So definitely support the man for that. And hopefully we'll get some bigger projects coming down the line here. Look at that book right there.
Yeah, this is episode 1, and I'm writing episode 12 right now. So, yeah, please feel free to read them. And a lot of these are based on true story, and there's a lot of fictionalization in them, Pete. You got to do, like, as you know, they're looking at me to do a TV show now and all that stuff on my life story. But Hollywood has its way of fictionalizing and, of course, making it look a lot more than what it wasn't a glamorous world. It was just a world of a bunch of young guys that took chances, made a hell of a lot of money, and had a great time spending it. And then, boom, the bell tolls and you got to pay the debt. My debt was more inside of my soul than it was getting caught. I did a stint in Folsom Prison in the 80s. I had a D number in those years, which is now, I guess, double X numbers. And then I went to a federal prison after that a few years later. And that was of my own accord. I made the choice to walk in and forever break away from that. But, I grew up in a normal neighborhood, a normal lifestyle. Back in I was a Boy Scout, and I took my oath and entered the Army 2 weeks after I was 17 years old. I was a paratrooper. I was overseas. I was very, very dedicated to the service of my country. And then I come back and I'm in college and decide to go down in the village, visit my friends in the village, not thinking about being a drug anything. But they talked me into bringing a car back down, and they put some compartments in it. And I ran my first 80 kilos of marijuana into the United States in the fall of 75, I believe. And boy, I tell you, after I crossed that border and got away with it that first time, I found something that I really love doing. I love the rush. I love the excitement. The money, of course, is great, but it was the rush of getting away with it. And when you've had the training by then in your life, that I'd had through the military, there's a discipline, there's a protocol, there's a chain of command. And these things I understood, and the cartel picked up on that. And they said, oh my God, he's blonde hair, blue eyes. He's a white boy that speaks our language and grew up in one of our villages in his childhood years. Man, don't get no better than that. And that's how that process started. Yeah. And then around 79 or 80, the marijuana all of a sudden stopped. And all of a sudden we're getting kilos of cocaine. And it went from hugs and handshakes to automatic weapons and killing people all over the place. And it turned extremely violent and lethal almost overnight. And at that point, I started having bodyguards with me because I was moving millions of dollars in cash, sending it south, and responsible for multi-millions of dollars of product at that time. And there's no such thing as, a load disappears. Those things don't happen. They just kill everybody even remotely involved. And In my book, A Fox in the Lion's Den, my autobiography, I talk about a friend and I who were taken down to just outside of Latuna in Sinaloa State up to a ranch where we were made to watch three Rottweiler dogs eat this guy alive right in front of us. And then we were taken in the house, and the hefe of the ranch said, well, this is because you guys are out buying gold chains and fancy cars, and you have absolutely no way of explaining the money you're making. So if you do any more of that foolishness, you'll come down here and feed the dogs. That's how the cartel trains their people. That's how the cartel controls their people. And that's the true way of the cartels. There's no mercy. There's nothing. There's just loyalty to the organization. So,
yeah. When you see the news about the border in America, and I don't want you to get political in this, but when you just think about from your experience, is this a source of our problem? So I've had a drug smuggler on the show before who actually was incarcerated at the time when we had the show. And he talked about it like it doesn't matter who the president is, it's just a business. We adapt to the business environment, and so it's not going to stop. But what are your thoughts when it's this permissive and the cost of that in terms of nefarious agencies and elements getting things into the U.S.?
It's a great question. It's good for your audience to hear this, because listen carefully, folks. As the governments and these agencies learn other methods of seizure and other methods of grabbing people, so too do the cartels at the same time learn other methods of getting stuff into this country and other methods of avoidance. Like I used to have a cop on payroll, and this is a good example. When the cartels got a hold of me here, we knew that they had a cop on payroll right away because of information that got laid on me as a result of looking at all four of my children on a cell phone, and the guy telling me, I'm going to whack your damn kids unless you do this, this, or this. And the only way they could, and I'm, as you know, I was a state licensed private investigator as a reward for my service to my country. I couldn't even get access to that type of intel on my adopted children, things like that. That comes from law enforcement agency people. So even here in Seattle, Washington, of all places, lo and behold, there's law enforcement that are definitely on the payroll of the cartels. When they have that kind of control, if you will, and the accountability that they have to be able to convey to their soldiers and their cells that are operational up here, they give them the assurances that we can transition because we're being fed information that shows us how to protect you, the people that work for us. What you have are a lot of cowboy operators up here that aren't connected to that stage or level of the cartels. And they think that they're invincible or impenetrable to the ability to be captured or caught in their actions, because they think, because I got these people on the street selling it for me, how the hell can they get me? Well, you know, the law enforcement people are so far more advanced than that nowadays. And there's there's a lot of technology effort that's put into taking down cells and taking down operators, if you will, that are outside of organizations or independent contractors. So the game is constantly changing, Pete. And as law enforcement is better, so do the cartels. Absolutely.
Yeah. The brain power inside these organizations, and the U.S. side, the task force, you got DEA, FBI, Army, counterintelligence, anybody can be brought in and their tools brought to bear. But how does the cartel counter that? Do they have the advantage because they're in front of the operations all the time, or do they hire the same kind of capability?
Well, it's like there was this thing called the Brownsville Act. It was enacted some years ago during the time I was operational going in on it. And every time an agent enters into Mexico under the rule of the Brownsville Act, they have to let the government of Mexico know that there's an operation going on or an agent's being infiltrated or inserted into their country. So that information immediately lands in the hands of the cartels, because the people that have access to that information, several of them are bought and paid for. So
sure,
whenever something new comes up for a way to do a seizure or make moves on arrests or things of this nature, how the hell do you think El Chappo stayed away from getting captured so many times? Because he had people all the way down there in the highest political positions that were able to prepare him. It's all intelligence.
What are the like when our worlds like overlap? If I think about, if I'm hired by El Chapo to run counterintelligence or counter anything operations, I'm going to make friends with cops. And look, and I'm just be honest about this. If if I can deal in pussy and I can go out and find people that aren't good at getting laid themselves and everything, I'm gonna win, you know. And that's just being blunt, like a hammer.
Yes.
If I build trust like I do, forget about it.
Well, human
I'm gonna
trafficking.
get access to people. Yeah,
Human trafficking feeds a very big business because you don't have to grow plants or cultivate laboratories or anything. You're moving people, and if they get caught, they get returned, and you can run them through again for a fee. So there's a lot of profitability, and especially in the sex trafficking trade and all of that that are introduced up here in the United States. Those girls are captivated; they're prisoners. It's horrifying. It's horrifying. I've been around some of that, and it's worse than the drugs by far. You're talking about the destruction of human life. And again, there's so many new avenues. What concerns me now is the insertion through the coyote trails, the insertion of Middle Easterners that have taken vows to blow up America. And they're now being inserted into the United States. I write about it in some of my novels. And, they pay the cartels an exorbitant amount of money. I mean, so much money that they can't refuse to do these type of operations where they're bringing in Syrians or Lebanon, people from Lebanon or wherever. And we have a lot of that going on right now that are being inserted into our country. And these sleeper cells become developed. And these are all as a result of the drug cartels have transitioned. They've grown. They've changed their game. And the money is very, very large. The profitability is very large. And think of the resources that they get having their doors open for operators coming in out of the Middle East and what the Middle East has to offer. Think about it. There's some real...
I do.
Yeah. I mean, of course, we're looking at human trafficking. We're looking at opium. We're looking at technology and weaponry. We're looking at all kinds of things. It just creates another avenue for them to be able to restabilize the work that they do in their cartel industries. Pretty amazing.
So, yeah, it is. One of the things I think about, like if I was president, what would I do, right? And so I wouldn't have some button-down dude as my drug czar if I was going to have a drug czar, right? I'd have you. And I would say, Hal, what are we going to do? You know this world. And then I would give you carte blanche, not only to dine well, but also to go out and do what you need to do. So what would you do? Like if Pete was president and they get, hey, Hal, I need your help. You don't have to, you can still do all the other stuff, but I want you to advise my organization on how to improve this. What are some of the simple things that need to change?
Well, it's the same thing as our U.S. government and the agencies that operate under the umbrella of the Department of Justice. Each agent has a specific goal set that he offers to the community of agents and the community of the intelligence world. You have people that do specific jobs. What the cartels do is they round up people like that payroll amount, plata or plumo. It's either silver or lead, brother. And that's exactly how they end up controlling a lot of those people. Of course, they're going to take the silver because they don't want to come home and find their family's heads sitting on their front porch. I've seen heads left on front porches. I know the effect that has to the people of that world. So dominance, terrorism within their own ranks, these kind of things, the cartels will never stop changing because those are the kind of things that best adapt to the weaknesses of people in general. So that's what they do. They recruit. If they have a need for a different type of a specific intel gathering, they'll find somebody in that field that does that specific intel gathering, and they will recruit them at any means possible. That's why I keep going back to that. As we transition in law enforcement, they transition in the cartel because they're using law enforcement. They have access to every single thing that we do. We think they don't, but I know they do. I'll never forget meeting that Russian guy that worked directly for the Politburo years ago. I was down there negotiating a 2,000 kilo coke deal through him. And through his intelligence resources, he just vanished off the face of the earth one day because he just didn't like the way the deal felt. And I mean, those kind of people really know what they're doing. And I've often wondered someday, am I going to step out to my car and that's going to be the end of that day? What does he know? But, you get older, you worry less about those things. Hell, I'll be 70 this year.
Yeah. Do you live with that fear, though? I mean, I know it's a possibility, but how present is that in your life?
It's always present, but I don't live with the fear. I live with awareness instead. I know how to When I had my private investigation agency, it was called Surveillance Services Northwest, specifically doing surveillance and counter surveillance. I know how to look for what I need to look for that's obviously becomes out of the norm. And you know this yourself, being operational, you develop a sense for those things, and an experience comes with that sense of development over a period of time. Well, hell, I got almost 20 years of my life needing to know those type of things. So resultant to all of that, I'm good to go. I don't live with no fear of anything at all. I don't have any reason to live with it. I didn't create the type of or element of enemies that are in my own backyard that would be susceptible to emotional response to something. What I went after was globalized. But yeah, it's 5 years ago they found me. It happens.
Yeah, it happens. That thing with fear, and I get asked that question a lot, like, weren't you afraid? And when you're a pro, no,
Yes.
It's dangerous. There's a lot of things that are dangerous in life. I always say, like, every football. My internet is acting buggy. Hey, so I always say, like, every football game, someone's going to get hurt, but the pros still go out and they still play, right? So we accept that there's danger, but also we're prepared for it, and we push as hard against mitigating it. We don't let fear stop us. Basically
no, absolutely not. And the other thing is, you can rely on the people on each side of you, as you and I had to on many occasions in our undercover times. The agents that I worked with, I wasn't somebody they looked down to at all because I had been a former drug trafficker or whatever other things I did for the cartels. They would look at me and say, well, he has experience. He is a professional. And over the course of many years, a credibility develops when you're using civilians of my stature that did the type of work that I did to become operational. And there's never a question on, you can tell that they do trust you. You can tell that you can trust them. I remember one takedown I did where we were worried about a sniper taking me out, and I was working with a specific law enforcement agency, and the guy put his body over mine as they were shoving me into a car to get me the hell out of there, because we had just done right there within seconds a major takedown. But that's my point. The guy took his own body and sheltered me as they shoved me in the back of the car and got me the hell out of there. And that's what it takes, because you never forget that agent that did that for you, and you know that you will do it for him, and he knows you will too. And that just takes years. That doesn't happen right away. But yeah. That's why
it's funny because so often our lives stack up in our Venn diagram, and we're in the same circle. I have been in a part of a unit that was hunted by a sniper. And so you do counter sniper operations. And so, like, one of the things is you move around in a pattern that makes it hard for you to be shot, And
that's
so
exactly right. I'm well familiar.
Right. So as I'm standing there doing my job, I'm doing this, W pattern. And then also there's a soldier who's like, you can't cover this spot. I'm going to stand.
Yeah. Exactly what happened to me, Pete. Exactly.
Oh my, fuck me, man.
I love that agent. I love that agent with all of my heart. I've known him since the day I walked in, and I'm not going to say any name or nothing, but him and I worked in multiple foreign countries together, developed what I would like to consider a friendship relationship. And then when he retired, he called me from his retirement party and said, Hal, you should be standing here beside me. And I told him, brother, I am beside you. It's all good. And that was the last time we ever had word again. After he left the agency, he could never contact me again because of my civilian status and my criminal status from earlier years. And I understood that. But there isn't a day goes by that I don't think of him. Not a day. And I'm sure he would reciprocate that comment. Yeah. It's just life, Pete.
The thing...
Go ahead.
The thing I was trying to say, and my Wi-Fi dropped out, so I want to make sure I get a chance to say this. So, you have a soldier or someone who stands in front of you when there is a sniper out there, and you're doing your counter sniper.
Yeah.
Doing all these, that also puts it back on me. And I can't be ill prepared. I have to be ready, and I can't let fear or anything else. I have to be crystal clear what my job is, because someone else is keeping me alive by blocking. And so that the level of the game has to rise. And that's the same on both sides of the thing. The sniper has to be that much better. And maybe we scare them out of there because now the pressure's too high here and they just go somewhere else and hunt. But that whole thing, your game has to elevate.
Yeah, it's the fight or flight syndrome, as you and I both know about, when the energy of the body responds to the action of that moment. I remember rolling out of this car as the guy's leveling a pistol at me, trying to put two in my head, and I hit the ground rolling. And as I got up, that agent came over and grabbed me and got me to another vehicle and got me in there. Why, they just came down like a ton of whatever on top of that poor guy in that car and the other people that were in that car. But yeah, you know, I wasn't afraid in the moment. I was just trying to avoid getting shot. And as a result of where we did the deal, we thought they may have a sniper on site. That's why. But you're not afraid in that moment, Pete. You're in such an adrenaline high, and you have the concept of surviving. That stays with you very strong. And then there's time later to decompress and go through the wiping the tears out of the eyes, or whatever stage of you're at with how you release your own stress and pressure. The gratefulness of a man willing to cover your body with his own type thing. It's those are the memories you have in those life and death moments. I do anyway.
Yeah, I definitely can think of the different sergeants that said, "Hey, Pete, I see you working. I'm going to protect you." And I didn't have to be because I would take my kid off, right? So I could be like the person I was talking to. So I put my kid on the ground because I'm like you now. Let's talk, you know?
Yes.
I don't want to take any more of your time. I just want everybody to go out and get book number 1 from the Fox series, or book wherever you're on, and buy that and get it.
I'm writing number 12 right now, awesome. Pete.
Number 12 is in the pipe.
Yeah, Operation Mexican Cartels is number 12. But they're absolutely amazing. And any of you that do decide to pick up the stories, start with number 1. Start with number 1 first. And we just did 3 AI audios on episode 1, 2, and 3 to test the markets and see how they do. So those are available too. But looking forward to talking to the producer associate of yours, and seeing where that's going to go. That's going to be exciting. I have a lady friend named Danny Aylesworth. She was a sergeant and worked in the intelligence field over there in the Middle East. And she worked with teams outside of the wire. And I've discussed her coming on your show, and she would be very interested to share her.
We're going to do it. We're going to do it.
Yeah.
Let's wrap this up.
Yeah.
Let's wrap this up, you and I here, and then we'll talk about that offline. What question do you want to ask me, or what thing do you want to say before I push the stop button on this thing?
Well, what I'd like to say is anybody ever finds them in a situation where it looks like it's an end of life scenario, if you try to break away from a lifestyle of such a magnitude, don't believe it. Don't buy into it. You make a decision, go through it all the way with your heart. There's no in between when you decide to say, I'm not going to let some cartel or some agency control my life forever anymore. This is what I'm going to do, but be thoughtful to it. And every one of you out there that are caught in organized crime and wanting to or desire to break away from it, you have to make that step. You have to make that decision. And then you have to follow through. Your life will depend on it. And that's my closing message. And God bless your audience and all of you, Pete. And just it's an honor, as usual, to be on your show.
Likewise. All right, stand by.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly.